You know who's traveling, who just got into a relationship, who changed jobs, who went out last weekend. You see the photos, you watch the stories. You scroll almost every day, but if someone opens your profile, they might learn almost nothing about what's happening in your life. Maybe your last post was months ago, maybe years ago. Maybe you take photos and never upload them. You watch other people's stories but rarely make one yourself. You use social media. But rarely share yourself. And maybe you've never thought that was strange, but there is an interesting contradiction here. You have access to other people's lives without giving them the same access to yours. You see them. They don't necessarily see you. So why can watching feel completely normal while being watched feels different? The simplest explanation is that maybe you just don't care about posting. And for many people, that's probably true. Not every ordinary behavior needs a hidden psychological wound. Some people don't enjoy creating content. Some don't think their day needs to become a public event. Some don't want to photograph their food before eating it. Some simply prefer using social media as entertainment rather than self-expression. That's enough. But for other people, something more interesting happens. They don't dislike social media. They actually use it quite a lot. They just prefer one side of the exchange. Observation. Imagine opening an app. Immediately, hundreds of little windows appear. Someone is on vacation. Someone bought a house. Someone is angry. Someone is engaged. Someone is at a concert. Someone is suddenly posting suspiciously inspirational quotes after a breakup nobody has officially mentioned. You can observe all of this without saying a word. Nobody needs to know you're there. Call it the observation advantage. Watching costs almost nothing in a specific way. It gives you information without requiring much self-exposure. You don't have to decide which photo represents you. You don't have to write a caption. You don't have to wonder who will see it. You don't have to watch the likes arrive. You don't have to ask yourself whether posting this looks attention-seeking. You don't have to wonder whether someone from work will interpret it differently from your friends. You just look and move on. That can feel surprisingly comfortable. Because posting is not just showing a picture. Posting creates an audience. The moment you upload something, your private experience becomes something other people can interpret. A photo from dinner becomes, who are they with? A vacation photo becomes, how can they afford that? A relationship post becomes, are they actually happy? A photo where you think you look good becomes, do they always need attention? Of course, most people may not be thinking any of those things. But you don't control interpretation once something leaves your hands. And that's one of the biggest differences between watching and posting. Watching lets you control your attention. When you post, you lose some control over meaning. The audience gets a turn. That is what we can call the exposure cost. Every act of sharing has some cost of being interpreted. Usually the cost is tiny. Sometimes it doesn't matter at all. But if you're someone who values privacy, control, or being accurately understood, even that small uncertainty can make posting feel unnecessary. You might take a photo you genuinely like. Your thumb hovers over post. Then a thought appears. Why am I posting this? Who is this for? Do I actually want people to know where I am? Does this look weird? Nobody cares. Forget it. And the photo stays in your camera roll. That moment is interesting because nothing is stopping you from posting. There is no rule, no technical problem. You simply don't see enough benefit to justify the exposure. And in a world where people are constantly encouraged to share, that can actually be a reasonable decision. Privacy is not avoidance. You are allowed to have experiences that never become content. You are allowed to enjoy something without proving that you enjoyed it. You are allowed to go somewhere without broadcasting your location. You are allowed to have a relationship that doesn't become a slideshow. You are allowed to change your life without announcing the update. There is something powerful about knowing this. Parts of your life belong only to the people who were there. And for some people, that privacy feels less like hiding and more like ownership. My life doesn't need an audience to be real. That's the gift. But like almost every useful psychological strategy, privacy can have another side. Because while you're deciding what others don't need to know about you, you're still learning a lot about them. You know your old classmate moved cities. You know your cousin has a new boyfriend. You know your coworker went hiking Sunday. You know somebody you haven't spoken to in 4 years just had a baby. And strange things can happen when information starts replacing interaction. You may feel updated on someone's life without actually having spoken to them. You see their wedding pictures. So you feel like you know how they're doing. You see their vacation. So you know what they've been up to. You see their birthday posts. So you know who they're still friends with. Meanwhile, that person may know almost nothing about you. That's the asymmetry. You can feel socially informed while remaining socially invisible. And because you've seen them so often, the relationship can feel less distant than it actually is. Imagine you meet an old friend. You immediately say, "I saw you went to Italy, that looked amazing." And they smile, then ask, "What have you been doing?" And suddenly you realize something. They have no idea. You know 6 months of their life. They know almost none of yours. Not because they don't care, because you never gave them anything to see. This doesn't mean you should start posting everything. It means visibility has social consequences in both directions. Sharing online is not the same thing as intimacy, but small pieces of visibility can create openings. A friend sees you're in their city, they message you. Someone sees you're learning guitar. They ask about it. An old coworker sees you changed jobs. They congratulate you. A cousin sees you went somewhere they love. A conversation starts. Posts can function like little social doors. You don't have to walk through them, but they give someone else something to knock on. If your profile is blank, those doors don't exist. Again, that may be exactly what you want, but it's worth noticing, because there is a difference between "I don't need strangers to know my life" and "I don't want anyone to have an opening into my life." The first is privacy. The second can sometimes become something else. This is the midpoint. Maybe never posting isn't really about disliking social media. Maybe it's about preferring access without exposure. You get to look through the window, but you keep the curtain closed on your side. And that can be comfortable. Very comfortable, especially if being misunderstood bothers you more than being unseen. Think about what happens when people see only fragments of you. They may form an impression from one picture, one sentence, one joke, one opinion. And you know how incomplete that is. You know the version of you eating lunch in a photo is not the same as your whole life. So perhaps the idea of turning yourself into fragments feels strange. Why should I reduce an experience to a post? Why should I make a private moment perform for people who weren't there? Why should I give hundreds of people a tiny piece of context and let them build whatever story they want? For someone who thinks that way, not posting can feel almost cleaner. If you can't understand me fully from a post, maybe I'd rather give you nothing. But notice the trade-off. If people can never understand you perfectly, an imperfect understanding becomes a reason to reveal nothing. Invisibility wins by default. Let's call this the invisible profile problem. The profile itself isn't the real issue. The pattern becomes interesting when it appears elsewhere. Someone asks what you've been doing lately. Nothing much. Someone asks how things are going. Fine. You achieve something you're proud of. You tell almost nobody. You're struggling. You handle it privately. You meet someone new. You learn a lot about them while revealing very little about yourself. That social media behavior may be part of a broader preference. Observing feels safer than being observed. Knowing feels easier than being known. And that distinction matters much more than whether you post a photo. Intimacy depends on asymmetry shrinking over time. At first, you know almost nothing about each other. Then I tell you something. You tell me something. I take a small risk, you take one too. Over time, the gap closes. Not completely. Nobody knows everything, but enough. You become more visible to one another. If one person always observes while rarely revealing anything, the relationship can hit a strange ceiling. The observer may feel connected because they know a lot. The other person may feel distant because they know very little. This can happen online. It can happen offline too. And sometimes people are surprised when others describe them as mysterious. They don't feel mysterious. Inside their own head, they have thousands of thoughts, preferences, stories, memories, opinions. They know exactly who they are, but other people do not have access to the inside of that head. They only know what crosses the boundary. That's obvious when you say it out loud, yet it's easy to forget. We often evaluate how known we are based on how much we know ourselves. Other people can only evaluate us based on what we make available, and social media exaggerates this difference. You can consume enormous amounts of information. You can produce almost none. One-way visibility becomes effortless. This is not necessarily bad. In fact, there are good reasons to resist constant self-presentation. Posting can easily become performance. You start with a simple photo. Then, is this good enough? Which picture? Should I edit it? What should the caption say? Is this too much? Too little? Why didn't that person like it? Who viewed the story? Why did they view it immediately? Why didn't they respond? Now an ordinary experience has become a tiny public relations campaign. Opting out of that can feel peaceful. You don't have to turn every experience into evidence. You can travel and just travel. Eat and just eat. Love someone without proving it. Make progress without announcing it. There is freedom in that. So the goal of this video is not, you should post more. That would be a strange conclusion. The real question is whether your privacy is flexible. Can you choose visibility when it serves you? Or has invisibility become so comfortable that you automatically choose it even when part of you wants connection? That's a very different question. Imagine you're having a difficult month. A friend messages, "How are you?" Your instinct is, fine. Not because you don't trust them, not because the situation is secret. You simply don't want to explain. That is understandable. But maybe 3 days later, you feel strangely alone. And here's the uncomfortable part. The person didn't reject you. They didn't even get the opportunity. The door never opened. This is why privacy and loneliness can sometimes exist next to each other without contradicting each other. You can genuinely value being private and still wish someone understood you better. You can dislike broadcasting your life and still want to be seen by specific people. You can hate public attention and still need private connection. Those needs are not opposites. The mistake is assuming the only alternatives are tell everyone everything or tell nobody anything. There is a huge middle. You don't need 800 followers to know you had a hard week. Maybe one friend should. You don't need to post your relationship. Maybe your partner needs to know what you're feeling. You don't need to announce your achievement publicly. Maybe you want to tell the person whose opinion actually matters to you. That is the transformation. Privacy doesn't have to mean invisibility. You can keep your life off the feed and still let people into it. And sometimes that distinction changes everything, because maybe your blank profile isn't a problem at all. Maybe it accurately reflects how you want to use social media. You watch, you learn, you laugh. You send things privately. You don't feel any meaningful desire to post. Fine. There is nothing that needs fixing. But if the behavior comes with another feeling, why does nobody really know what's going on with me? Why does everyone seem closer to each other? Why do people stop checking in? Why do I feel invisible? Then the answer may not be to start posting. It may be to notice where else you're withholding invitations to know you. There is another subtle reason people sometimes stay quiet online. Posting creates permanence. Even if you delete something later, it can feel like you've made a temporary version of yourself official. Maybe 6 months from now you won't care about this hobby. Maybe this relationship won't last. Maybe you'll change your mind. Maybe you'll look back at the caption and cringe. Watching requires almost no commitment to identity. Posting says, "This is me," at least right now. And some people are uncomfortable with that because they experience identity as something more fluid. They don't like feeling pinned down. A label that feels right today might feel wrong next year, so the blank profile creates room. No explanation required. No archive of old selves. No audience watching the changes. Again, that can be healthy. But the same flexibility test still applies. Can you reveal something without feeling trapped by it? Can you let someone see one version of you without believing they now own the definition? Because being known always involves some loss of control. You cannot completely control another person's picture of you. You can clarify, correct, explain. But ultimately, they have their own mind, and maybe that's the deeper tension beneath this entire topic. Watching preserves control. Being seen requires surrendering a little of it, not all of it. Just enough to let another person have their own experience of you. That's part of why connection can feel risky. It's also part of why connection means anything. If the only version of you another person is allowed to know is the one you can perfectly manage, they're not really meeting you. They're meeting a presentation. Ironically, someone who refuses to post because they dislike performing may still perform in another way, by revealing only what can never be misunderstood, which may eventually mean revealing very little at all. So maybe the healthiest question isn't, should I post more? It's, what am I protecting when I choose not to be seen? Sometimes the answer is, my peace. Great. Sometimes, my privacy. Reasonable. Sometimes, I genuinely don't care. Also fine, but sometimes the answer is, I don't want people to judge me. I don't want anyone asking questions. I don't want people to know enough to disappoint me. I don't want to explain who I am. I don't want to need anyone's reaction. Those answers aren't automatically problems either, but they're worth understanding. Because a behavior can look identical from the outside while serving completely different purposes inside. Two people can both have empty profiles. One feels free. The other feels hidden. One doesn't post because social media simply isn't important. They watch everyone every night, quietly wondering why nobody knows them. The behavior is the same. The meaning isn't. Psychology is more useful when it stops trying to tell you what a behavior proves. And the better question is what function the behavior serves for you. Does watching entertain you? Help you stay updated? Give you ideas? Does staying private protect something you value? Fine. Does the combination leave you feeling connected enough? Then there may be nothing to change. But if you know everyone else's life while feeling unknown in your own, notice it. Not as a reason to create a content strategy, as a reason to ask where you actually want to be visible. Maybe it's not on Instagram. Maybe it's one dinner, one phone call, one honest message, one person. The opposite of invisibility isn't publicity, it's being known somewhere. And that can happen completely offline. Next time you're scrolling through everyone's updates and your own profile sits almost empty. Don't assume that says anything grand about your personality, just notice the arrangement. Everyone else's windows are open, yours is closed. Then ask, is that how I want it? If the answer is yes, keep scrolling. Your life does not owe the internet a performance. But if part of you wishes someone could see through that window, you don't have to open it to everyone. You only need to decide who is worth letting in, because privacy is something you choose. Invisibility is what happens when nobody gets access. And there is a difference between being private and being so good at watching other people's lives that you forget to let anyone participate in yours.